That's gross, man. I am streaming now, by the way, so just to make sure we're
Good.
getting through.
Yeah, let me get one or two more things up. Sorry.
It's all good.
VL, right? I always
Yeah,
yeah,
it's Trushan VL, but he's going by VL only these days. So
yeah. Do.
so yeah, I mean, I'm excited about this Stanley Cup winning team that we've got going here. So
Yeah, so I'm gonna I'm gonna I'm gonna go on a little rant setup for this one. Hold on, let me just make sure I get the
that's
not a
fine.
bad rant, not a bad rant. I have a specific setup I'm thinking in mind that I think would be a really good way to frame everything, and
Okay.
I would like to surprise you because I'm a
No, that's
sadist.
fine. I'm ready. Just let me know when you're ready to actually kick off, and I'll actually start the recording.
Yeah, I'm just gonna share the thing to Facebook real quick if you haven't
Okay.
already.
No, I just did Twitter. I've
Yeah, you did. Okay. Um, where am I? Right. Ah, ah, computer. My new setup is phenomenal for podcasting, but it's also facing a window, and I'm slightly hungover, which is not the best thing to face. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You're just
I was
listening in
chuckling. I was chuckling to myself.
Ugh, that's the worst.
Yeah, I had my giant beer in the mid afternoon yesterday. That helps avoid the the overnights.
You know what? It was one of those things where I was like, this is really good wine.
Hmm.
Why am I still drinking wine? Now it's late and I'm still drinking the wine. We were actually watching Mythic Quest.
Oh, nice.
That show.
Yeah, that show's not terrible. I like it.
It nails it. Well, you know what? It's got great side characters, and
Yeah.
I love seeing the actor that plays Cricket. Yeah,
I've
I'm a big Always Sunny fan. So
yeah, I probably my favorite episode. I don't know how far are in there.
we're done.
Okay, my favorite episode is actually the flashback to the earlier game dev because that was so real.
Oh yeah,
All
trust
of
me.
it was so real.
Yeah. Nailed it.
Yep.
All right. Let's do
Should
this. So 161 is correct, right?
Yeah, 161. I'm gonna kick off the recording.
Sure. Let me just. I'm gonna forget to. No. And let me know.
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, okay. Sorry, got a little bit of a wine still stuck in my throat, apparently.
Gross.
Oh yeah, it's not great. Here we go. Hello and welcome to Circling the Cup, San Jose Sharks podcast, episode number 161. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, guys, where have you been? A lot's happened the last couple of weeks. And, well, I'm going to tell you real quick. You see, something happened in the NHL that we're not even going to address at this point because it's just too late. And that is, there was an incident with Tim Peel, the referee. Now, if you've listened to this podcast for the last 5 years or so, you know that the second that occurred, that our very own Colin was salivating. He was ready. He had a rant lined up. He's been waiting for his moment to shine, to have a podcast going off on the NHL refereeing. But Ben and I, being the sadists that we are, decided, let's not let him have his joy, because that's how this podcast works. So we took a little bit of a break, but we are back. I think I already said I'm Alex. If not, I'm Alex. Here with me, as always, is the Honorable Ben. What's up, Ben?
Plan that Stanley Cup parade, everybody.
Oh, yeah. We're going to have fun on this
Jeff
podcast.
Veal is the answer.
And not with us this week because we used all of our calling card tokens is Colin, who is taking a little break there in Sweden. Ben, you bring up an interesting situation here because since we took a break, the Sharks have magically inched their way into a potential playoff spot. Now, I want to point out something that occurred in this time span because I think it's kind of interesting to watch. First, while we were gone, Gabriel came in and a lot of fans latched on. Oh my gosh, is he the missing piece? Was he the one piece that would bring everything together? Is he the Captain America to our Avengers? No, that was never going to be the case. And just as quickly, those fans kind of got off that train. Now, I see the exact same thing happening with Jeffrey Viel, which I don't understand why people would do that again there. Don't get me wrong. I like that guy's game. I like that guy's hustle. But a word of advice, especially if you are a newer fan, if the Sharks are having a pretty bad season, getting close to the playoffs now aside, it has been a pretty bad season. And you are just now hearing a name you haven't heard before as a prospect that wasn't touted earlier in April of a shortened season. Probably not a guy that's going to be the second coming of Connor McDavid. So I just want to make sure that people understand, and that's not to knock him or his work ethic, because, you know, if you read his scouting reports and all that stuff, that's his MO, right? He's got a really great work ethic, and that's great. The Sharks need that. And we've made it very clear we have been all for the Sharks getting these, younger guys for the most part. He's not the youngest guy in the world, but playing time and seeing what the Sharks actually have. And so we're encouraging of that. I would just temper expectations in terms of what a player of his caliber is going to be doing. By now, you should already have an idea, even if we haven't seen them all play, of who the org believes the top prospects in the system are. You should also have an idea of who our primary players on the NHL roster are. You should also have a vague idea, depending on how you follow it, of who's who on the AHL roster. So don't maybe expect a crazy dark horse to come out of the middle of nowhere, because that goes beyond diamond in the rough. That is like diamonds in the rough. So what I want to talk about this podcast, Ben, if you're cool with it, is this sort of playoff situation. Is this a good thing? Are the Sharks going to do anything here? I know that there are a handful of people who have been texting me this last week going, are you going to eat crow if they make the playoffs? No, I'm actually very happy if the Sharks make the playoffs, because there are some benefits for it. So
are there?
Then why don't we? Well, sort of. And why don't we start with a bit of a pros and cons here now? Just so everyone knows, we're not saying the Sharks will necessarily make the playoffs. It's just that they've closed the gap with a little 4-game win streak. And they have had slightly better play over the course of that period. Yeah. Jones is getting, into 900-ville.
Woo! He's fixed, everybody.
And a few other things. But okay. So Ben, because I think you and I agree with the overall take, and we'll get to what that is if it's not already clear. But pros and cons here of the playoffs. I'll go first. I'm going to go first with the pro. Mm-hmm. Okay. Pro would be that some of these younger guys, assuming that they even stay on our roster, will get playoff experience, which is always good. That is a good boost of confidence as well. And I'm going to throw in a bonus pro here, which is actually the main pro of that pro. And that is, if the Sharks players magically start doing well now, there is a chance of smoke and mirrors in terms of value at the deadline, which for me, I've maintained all season that I think the Sharks have fairly good players, but they're not either the right combination of players or the coach, or they're not being coached or brought together correctly. Yeah. But I also, that being said, I also do not believe they are one piece off.
Right.
And that's an important distinction. So for me, when I look at this trade deadline, what I am hoping for is that some of these players who are maybe fringe at best boost their value enough that someone will take them for picks and help free up cap space a little bit, so that we can actually move forward and bring in whatever it is that we feel we need to bring in. So the Sharks making the playoffs, or at least making a push for the playoffs, some guys who need the experience and confidence will get a shot at that. Depending on play, this could boost a couple of players' value just enough so that we're not selling at the lowest of low, which is what it really looked like we would be selling at basically throughout the entire season. I mean, and you don't want to be selling low and buying high in any situation. For the Sharks, they really need to be restocking their cupboard here, right? So, you want to get the best possible prospects or picks back as you can. If you can get a player, a young player who has a lot of upside and is filling a gap, great. I think it's a little bit tough with the Shark situation, but I don't know. There's two pros for me. You want to throw a con or you got a pro here?
I mean,
What do you want?
I think so. What tears me up about where the Sharks are is okay. So there are three good teams in our division, and there
Right.
are four bad teams in our division, and then there's one god awful team in our division, right? So
Right.
really, what we're fighting for if we make the playoffs is the right to have the utter shit kicked out of us by Colorado, probably, right? Because it's going to be, I think it's 1 versus 4 when we get to the playoffs. I don't know how the structure is going to work, and God only knows whether there will be a playoffs because Vancouver is like completely taken over by COVID right now. Um, and honestly, if you look at Arizona, St. Louis, San Jose, LA, these are the teams that are bad. We're literally interchangeable.
Yeah.
I think we're all equally flawed teams ultimately. Particularly if you look at goal differential, which is a pretty good, long-term predictor of, what your record's going to be. I mean, LA actually is the one that's underperforming that. So, one of these three bad teams, above LA is going to make the playoffs, and it doesn't really matter. I guess my pro is, the good thing to not totally tanking, and their tanking doesn't necessarily work because of the lottery anyway. But the good thing to it
Right.
is, there have been teams that have tried the tank approach that have gotten really great draft picks and then just continue to tread water after that. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if it's they just don't have a good culture in the locker room, or they've just, they're a badly run team, so they just never assemble the right group of coaches and development people and GMs and whatever. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of
It's a
Buffalo,
common.
right?
It's always going to be a combination, right? That's why you can't look at any one element. And again, unless you're like literally on the cusp of being that cup team, and even then, probably not. But it's
I
not
mean,
like we get the number one draft pick and we're good. Look at Edmonton, who
yeah,
had the number one
right.
draft pick like
Well,
for a decade.
I was gonna say, so it's Buffalo, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
Edmonton are perfect examples of that. Though Edmonton is in pretty good shape ish this year, so maybe they finally got it, right?
Yeah, but if you look at how many firsts they burned to get
Yeah,
there,
yeah. No,
that's an
no.
unusually high
Well,
number
no, they
of
they treaded
supposed
they treaded water
supporters.
before they got the right GM in there and the right, coaching staff and support staff for quite a while. And
Correct.
Toronto too. Toronto went through that whole period until they finally, got some actual like creative thinkers into their front office essentially. Like Brendan Shanahan put together a really great group of folks, and then eventually they shifted to the forward thinkers, and there you go, right? So it takes
Right.
work, and it's not guaranteed. You so the upside, the pro here is that you don't run the risk of building a bad culture, right? A culture that just accepts losing, which I don't know what for sure that's a huge risk, but you know it's it's not terrible. I think the problem is that as you talk about whether you're a buyer or seller at the trade deadline this year, and guys have had their value pumped up maybe by the win streak. I think the more the Sharks get closer to a playoff spot, the less incentivized the team is to
Uh-huh.
move somebody who has been basically campaigning to get moved,
Right.
like Patrick Marleau, right? And
Yeah.
Marleau isn't exactly pitching in much to the wins, so I'm not sure he's building value anyway. Also, if you're moving, middling guys for picks, you're getting picks back that are second rounders, third rounders, fourth rounders. These are not guys who are going to immediately come into the lineup in 2 years
No.
and change things, right? So, I've never been an advocate for a full-on tank, but if you want a guy who's going to be potentially ready to come in 2 years, you need to be drafting in the top 15 at the very least. And
Right.
I think a playoff run puts that in a real risk. And honestly, you need to be in the top 10, right? If you
Yeah.
look at
Right.
the guys the Sharks have been able to bring in relatively quickly that they've drafted, and when they've successfully drafted in the first round, it's been drafting, in the top 10. Besides Hurdle, Couture was 8, Meyer was 9, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up two really good points there. One being the more likely it is that they are going to make the playoffs, the less likely it might be that they're going to trade. That is probably true. And I agree most of the time. And I'm not saying I disagree this time, although I do think that Doug Wilson has a pretty decent understanding of the situation with the Sharks. And so I don't necessarily feel like he would be fully held back, but yeah, it's gonna handcuff you a little bit in terms of what you're willing to do and the optics of it, whether it should or not. The other thing to point out is those middling picks. I totally agree with you, and that's even if you're in the top 10, it's not a guaranteed necessarily.
Correct.
But the perk of those picks there is that they can be packaged to sweeten other potential deals, and the Sharks need to do a couple of things, right? First, they need to rebuild their depth. That's really important for them. They are not a deep team at all now. Like they're barely they're like two lines at most. And if an injury happens, it's pretty scary for them. And then the other thing that they need to do is just find the right combination of players here. And so the difficult thing for me with these playoffs are I'm with you. I think whenever I see fans calling out tanking, I've never believed in tanking, period, for any sport. I don't believe that's I get that can be employed as a strategy depending on the sport, but for me, it's almost like unethical to intentionally do that. I mean,
well, yeah, it's antithetical to the whole point of sports. The whole point of sports is to win games, which is fun. Right. And that's been, the last 4 games have been fun to watch because the Sharks look like a competent team, except for maybe last night against LA. Yeah. But that's the second half of a back-to-back, and the coaching staff made the decision to play Jones in both ends of the back-to-back, which was stupid. So you can kind of excuse a team for looking less, effective in that position.
Yeah.
And that's good and it's fun. And I'm not going to say I wouldn't be excited to see the Sharks in the playoffs. It's just the cost of it.
Well, that's what I was going to get to. So first of all, going back to the tank, as you said, I think this is really important for fans that we're calling for the tank and will call for a tank in the future to understand is with a lottery, your tank is meaningless. It is not particularly helpful. Now, don't get me wrong. The worse you finish, the higher your draft pick potentially is. But again, you're reaching for those first 10 guys, and unless you're, the lottery is going to snag probably the first 1 or 2 there. So, it would be a high risk strategy to tank as well. And I think that's kind of where I'm conflicted with this. And it sounds like it's the same place you are, which is I'm looking at the cost benefit of the situation. The Sharks, in my mind right now, are not a Stanley Cup team. They're not even close to a Stanley Cup team. I don't really have a very strong feeling that they would be a dark horse team at all either, because there's nothing in their underlying metrics, save these last 4 games, which is, again, just 4 games, that would suggest anything otherwise. Now, is it possible they get in and all of a sudden Erik Karlsson becomes the 2017 Erik Karlsson and, Jones suddenly is unstoppable? Or not unstoppable, stoppable, I guess, savable, and just those 2 alone drag the team through. Yeah, sure. I mean, the old maxim was always, "Hey, just get there," and it's
right.
the NHL playoffs, and it's a new season.
And Karlsson has experience dragging a team into
for sure.
I mean, but it was a younger Karlsson, and like anything can happen in the playoffs, but you're rolling the dice.
Yeah, and I guess my point here is I don't believe the Sharks have had that team in the past a lot. One of the things that I always really get defensive about when I'm talking to fans of other teams is when they call the Sharks chokers, and the reason that I've historically been defensive about it has not been because I haven't felt like they've choked at points. Obviously,
the T-Mac teams definitely did.
But for a long time, when the Sharks got labeled chokers, they were coming in as the 8th and 7th seed. Yeah. They were upsetting the 1st or 2nd seed, and then they were getting knocked out in the 2nd round. So I always looked at it from the underdog, position of, well, we're not chokers. The team wasn't good enough to get to where they were, and they upset a major team.
Yeah,
that is huge, and that's how I've always framed it. But the thing is like I don't feel like this is that team at all. So when I look at things, I right now. If you asked me a couple of years ago when the Sharks, and not the cup. Maybe I shouldn't put a number value in any way, shape, or form. In the past, there have been teams where I would have looked at it and said, "Go for it," because this is the window. Yada yada. I right now feel like this window is closed, or like last sliver being open and not enough to actually get through. And so for me, I want to get back there. I want to get back there and be good and consistent. And I want the Sharks to be a force to reckon with again. And in order to do that, them advancing to the playoffs, probably not the best thing. Again, for the two things that we pointed out. One, affects their draft picks. And two, Ben, and I think it was brilliant that you pointed this out because I would have missed it. The closer they get, the less likely they may be to pull trades that would benefit their future. And again, one of the difficult things that you really have to pay attention to with the Sharks team is, Doug Wilson will frequently communicate that, it's he's going to retool on the fly or do a slight reset. And that's because that's what he needs to do. And it's also to an extent what he needs to say. And he may not be wrong with that. However, the reality is, again, the organization right now is not deep. It's probably the shallowest it's been in quite a while. And so even if he can swap in a couple of people at the NHL level, as we all know, if you're going to win a cup these days, you need to have 4 competent lines and then additional support depth in case someone gets hurt or is slumps or whatever. And the Sharks are pretty far off from that.
I mean, the biggest problem is the fourth line is just utter garbage. Not that, look, you talked about Viel in the beginning, and I'm gonna tell you all that I like Viel more than I liked Curtis Gabriel, and I've got a couple reasons for that.
To be fair, Gabriel never gonna be your guy.
I think Viel. Look, Viel is supposed to fill the same role, right? Hit guys and occasionally throw a punch and whatever. I don't give a shit about the throw a punch stuff, meathead bullshit, whatever. But this is a league for meatheads, run by meatheads, so that's just the way things are. But what I like about Viel is this is a guy who does, the difference between Viel and Curtis Gabriel is Gabriel saw his role as putting a punishment on people, and this is the same thing that Michael Haley did. It's the same thing that Mike Brown did back in the day. They didn't have the brains to know when to deploy their skills. So they would go for a huge hit and then be completely out of the play, which puts the rest of your team, on their heels, etc. They would fight at the wrong moment or not fight when they should fight. It would just be like they didn't seem to know when to do those things. Viel has been, I think, at least from my perspective, less likely to fight. He's been no less likely to hit, but what you'll notice is he's hitting in the context of, the zone in which he is in, right? So he doesn't hit as much in the offensive zone because that's going to end up with you, getting yourself up off the boards while the play goes the other direction, potentially. And he's waiting for the right moments to put a lick on a guy in the defensive zone where you've got layers of support there if the puck squirts away, right?
Yeah.
And that's fine, right? Also, he seems to be able to actually move with the puck a little bit, which, is something that none of those other 3 guys was really very capable of doing. So I'm fine with Viel. Also, he's 24. Yep. Gabriel is 27. I'd rather have a guy who is entering his physical peak be on that fourth line than any of the other guys who are legitimately all of them past their physical peak. Gabriel's past his physical peak. Marleau is decades past his physical peak. And the less said about Sorensen, I think, the better. At this point, if I were the Sharks,
majestic hair.
He does have great flow. He's Swedish. They all have great flow. If it was up to me, that everyone but Viel on that line would be on the block. Sorensen should move. Marleau should move.
Do you think they're not on the block? Pretty sure they're on the block.
I don't think they're. I don't think they're on the block. I don't think they're on the block if this team is going to make the playoffs. I don't think.
Well, yeah, they may get taken off the block, or Wilson may keep them on the block, hear out what the offers are, and then not do anything. But I definitely think those guys have been on the, hey, if you want them, give me a ring, and we'll see if we can work almost anything out for you.
I don't know.
Just my
I don't know that they are. I don't know what this team's goals are. I mean, look, rationally, this team should be trying to collect second, third, fourth, and fifth round picks for these guys that aren't going to be here next year.
Right.
They should be trying to maybe move some of the anchors, which is much harder. When Vlasic got pulled from the game last night, when he got hurt, upper body, by the way, everybody. The morons on Twitter were like, "Oh, he got traded! Oh, he got traded!" And it's like,
Yeah, I didn't understand that at all.
it's like, okay, so yes, I mean, if he did get traded, you throw a ticker tape parade for Doug Wilson without a cup right now.
Yeah.
But no, that's not what happened. That's not going to happen. If he got traded mid-game, I don't think they have any obligation to pull Vlasic. You pull a guy from a game if there's maybe a trade on the table. Anyway, whatever. Also, if you're the Sharks and you manage to trade Vlasic, that is like the thing you are blasting out on the broadcast. You are immediately.
That is a bad contract for a player whose value has plummeted. I mean, that is like, I have to admit, Ben, I know we're in our own little podcast bubble here sometimes, especially when it comes to the fan base, but this year in particular, I feel so disconnected. I have not understood what people are thinking, because, one of the things that you see pop up frequently is they should trade X, and then you look at X's contract and you go, and you comps and you go, that's not appetizing. And then the second thing that you see pop up all the frickin' time, and it's going to pop up until it doesn't occur next season, are people who are like, well, what's going to happen? Maybe we can get, maybe Seattle will rescue us. Seattle's in our division, guys.
Yeah.
And they're not idiots.
They're going to extort a price. If they do something yeah.
If they were to do that, they're going to take someone that you do not want them to take.
Yeah.
I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah,
they're not going to take a boat anchor for the sake of it to help us, their competition out. Same way Vegas, not really willing to do that.
I mean, no, but Vegas also, as you say, like Seattle has that Vegas template to go by, and Vegas very much was like, well, we're going to pick this very valuable guy unless you mortgage your future. It only really worked with Florida, but still, I mean, brutal decisions made by other teams, and the Sharks to get rid of a Vlasic, to have a Vlasic picked. First of all, Vlasic would have to agree to move because he's got a no movement clause. Second, they're going to want something like Meyer. They're going to want.
Can I tell you something? Yeah. Can I say something great about that too? This is the other area that I didn't really understand with the fan base, right? And when I say fan base, I don't mean all of you necessarily, because there are some people that I think really slow down and think things through a little bit more, and some that are just driven by passion and excitement, and that's fine too. There's lots of different ways to watch sports.
Yeah.
But I saw a lot of people going, well, if the Sharks are bad enough, then maybe Karlsson would willingly waive his clauses and go. And hey, I understand where that logic comes from, but you need to think of the other side of that logic. If the team is so bad that Karlsson is willing to do that, does not send a great message to other prospective free agents coming into the franchise that this is a place to be right now. And so, these things don't happen in vacuums.
Right. Also,
it's all connected.
On top of that, there's no incentive for a team to pay full value for a desperate Karlsson who wants to leave.
Yeah,
right.
Correct.
So if Karlsson goes to Doug and says, "I want you to trade me," that's not good for what you're going to get in return.
Yeah, it's not good for anyone in any situation. Yeah. Your destination is going to be less appealing for grabbing, having people come in or sign extensions.
Yeah.
You're going to have terrible PR. You are going to not be in a good negotiating point because obviously you're being bent over a barrel by your opponents over here because they know he wants out, and it's going to be miserable if you don't get him out. They're not going to give you a top dollar.
Yeah. No
one's going to help you out in this league. It's not the way.
Yeah.
It's not the way it works.
Yep. Yeah. So I think the way I look at it is, I think the Sharks need. I don't care if the Sharks make the playoffs. It's probably good-ish if the Sharks make the playoff. It doesn't help in the very short run. But I think the team has to be approaching the trade deadline as let's move some of these, older, not long-term pieces for picks. And that's not just good, I think for the team in the midterm because, you're drafting more depth. I think it's also good because it will open up spots that should be right now filled by better players. I mean, there's no reason that Marlowe should really be playing. You've got Noah Gregor sitting on the taxi squad doing nothing. He should be playing. Like again, like this, the how they deploy the young guys has been super puzzling to me this year. It just continues to not make a ton of sense. But
I'm for the Sharks making the playoffs on the condition that they, as an organization, do not lose focus of what the core goal should be, which is to continue to rebuild this team. If they get into the playoffs and they get distracted by the idea that they can be a dark horse team and win the cup, I'll be pretty annoyed, to be honest. If they miss the playoffs, at this stage, I honestly don't mind all that much, because I've been resigned to the fact that I don't think that this team is a playoff worthy team or will do any damage there. So I kind of hug that line, and I think, again, if you're a Sharks fan, look, I know we all want a cup, but we if you want to be a realist here, the odds of this group right now, with the way that they're playing, even in this 4-game win streak, being that team is so minuscule right now. It's not non-existent, because there's always technically a chance, but it is probably the worst shot they've had in ever. So, just let's maybe not lose sight of what this team is, where this team needs to go to get it back to the way we all, I think, collectively want it to be, which is that team that was making the playoffs every year and that was supposed to go all the way, even though they didn't every year. If you want that back, this team absolutely has to be focused on getting there, not trying to win a cup before something's shut. This stuff is shut.
Yeah.
So let's focus on it. Let's talk about a couple of games here.
Sure.
Ben, so we're not going to go all the way back, because that would be crazy cakes, but we can't talk about this week in particular. So, we've been doing this podcast on Sunday lately because of scheduling challenges with a, co-host overseas in the wonderful Sweden, and their own life schedules. It's not all Colin's fault all the time.
It's mostly my fault, because I said no more Friday nights, so I will be clear about that.
Yeah, it's all good. We're still here. We love each other. The Sharks, basically, I'm gonna start this week on the second game of the back-to-back with the Coyotes. The Sharks ended up losing this game by a score of 4-0 in what was not a particularly convincing effort. One thing I will point out, and one player who has popped up who I have been very happy with as of late, I like Rudolfs Balcers. I think grabbing him back was great. I don't know why I'm pointing that out in this game in particular, because he wasn't necessarily stellar in this one.
He was the piece I regretted losing in the trades to Ottawa. Tierney, I loved Tierney when he was here, but that was a guy who was a limited player. Balcers, as a young guy, was the guy that I thought the Sharks were going to miss. I mean, also miss a little bit. I can't remember. Josh Norris, I miss him in those trades as well, but Balcers was young and he's a shooter, and yeah.
Well, I mean, the Sharks for a long time have had a habit of reaching for those diamonds in the rough, finding a couple for sure, and then trading them before they. You look at like Chris Coyle, and a lot of other players who
Charlie Coyle, by the way.
Charlie Coyle, sorry. Had too much wine last night, I think, as we've covered before the podcast. So struggling a little bit here, but yeah, I mean, they've had a lot of guys like that who, were known to be likely NHL players, and who the Sharks moved on from early, not because they did anything wrong, but because they were, trying to continue to trade for that last piece. And so, that's the other thing that I do want the Sharks to be a little bit careful of moving forward, is just sort of, hey, we can't keep drafting guys and then trading them. We do have to develop a couple of them, because again, 4 lines, that's a lot of players that you got to have ready to go here. So so Sharks in this game 4-0, not really a ton to talk about in it. We're going to hop over to the next game. This is where the win streak, so to speak, begins. And I love that everyone's freaking out about a 4-game win streak, and that's only because the Sharks have not been able to really put together consecutive wins. It's like kind of a feeling. Sharks would win this first game against the Wild by a score of 4-3. In the first period, the Wild would open up scoring. Then Shemek would score, making it 1-1. And then the Wild, Nick Bonino would score. So the Sharks were down again. And then Erik Karlsson would come in and score. And then he would come in and score again in the third. This to me, by the way, and Erik Karlsson would score the game-winning goal in a shootout.
Would you say this was Erik Karlsson's best offensive game?
There have been, I don't. I'm trying to think of the right thing to say here, because we technically qualify as hockey media, right? So I don't want to be a complete asshole about this. There have been 2 points.
No, I'll do it. That was one of the dumbest questions.
There have been 2 points this season so far where, I personally, I like watching the pregame. I like watching the postgame just because it's something to do. Even though I know that most of what you're going to get out of the postgame is going to be fluff, because, hockey players aren't great interviews. They're not really going to tell you much anyway. There have been 2 really stupid questions. The first came from Kevin Kurz, which I think we made fun of at the time, which was
we did.
Asking Burns essentially, if the players were hustling more in the locker room. I can't even remember what it was. It was so baffling that anyone would ask a professional athlete whether they were trying or not. And then there was this one, which was, Erik Karlsson, who was brought here because he was an offensive defensive powerhouse who single-handedly dragged the Ottawa Crap Senators to the Eastern Conference Finals after having multiple multi-goal, multi-point games, comes into an absolutely meaningless game in a shitty year, gets 2 goals. Don't get me wrong, this was a great game for him, and wins the game on a shootout goal. Gets asked, was that your best offensive performance? And he's just sitting there chewing an apple, and he goes, no.
Not even close.
Not even close. And the odd thing about that to me was very clear that whoever asked that question probably wasn't familiar with this work or really watching a lot of hockey, and that's fair. Sometimes you get reporters in there who, aren't the beat guys or aren't covering the sport that closely. But I'm trying to understand, as someone who, was a partial journalism major as part of my major in college, what would that question have led to in an article? Like, were you going to write, Karlsson said that this was his best offensive effort to date? Like, no, not really. So I don't even understand where that came from. But hopping back to the game, Karlsson had a good game here. And that's one of the things that we really need to see more of, because obviously Karlsson is a major component of our current plan. And, we saw what he can do before he came to the Sharks. And then he came to the Sharks and he's had a rash of injuries, and that sucked. And then on top of those injuries, it has at points looked like he's just not quite in sync with everyone else for various reasons. It could be because, the coaching staff in the past was mixing up lines and no one was clear on what their roles were supposed to be. It could be that Karlsson is sort of a natural-born quarterback on a team that historically has had other natural-born quarterbacks. If you go back and look at, like, when Thornton was around, for example. Yeah. So it could be role confusion. It could be all sorts of things. But the reality is, when Karlsson is capable of playing his game, he's good. And so seeing a game like this come from him was nice and encouraging, and I want to see more.
I mean, I think it just shows that he needs to shoot more. Like,
I can't remember if I pointed this out on the podcast or not over the years, but I know I've said it to you guys and my friends a billion times over. But one of the things that used to aggravate the hell out of me is I love Joe Thornton. Love Joe Thornton. I've also played hockey, not at the NHL level. Make it very clear, but it doesn't matter. If you've ever played hockey, you know that if you can stick handle as well as Joe Thornton can, and you can pass through time and space the way he can, you sure as hell can aim a puck and shoot it on net. And there would be a lot of points where the Sharks, when he was on the roster, across the years, his entire career here, where clock would be ticking down, the Sharks would need a goal, and he would be holding, passing, waiting for the perfect setup that just wouldn't come. And I always looked at it like, dude, shoot the effing puck. You're good enough to. And Karlsson is another one of those players where you look at him and you go, your puck control, awesome. Your passing, great. Although you seem to pass it a little hard, like that quarterback, like that kid quarterback that can't figure out that you're not supposed to rifle the ball at every occasion. Sometimes you want a little bit of a lob. So in that case,
you mean he's a Kaepernick?
Shoot. Basically, yeah, right. Perfect example. So in that case, shoot. And the goal that he scored in the third period, laser beam. Like I had to rewind it just to make sure I could actually see the puck move. I almost for a second there wanted the Fox glowing puck back, so I could at least have a giant red streak across my screen.
I mean, my favorite part of that whole sequence actually was his goal in the shootout was a slapper right after some clown on the other team had missed a slapper. And just was clearly meant as like, look, bud, before you do this, you should probably learn to shoot.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. Here's the thing that's so awesome about that, right? Is, I know we've been down on Karlsson at points in this podcast, but like that's mostly out of frustration because that's a player who literally just said, let's just end this game.
Yeah.
And did. And again, if you go back and look at what he did with the Ottawa Senators on that playoff run, that's literally, he was like, enough of this bullshit. I'm going to win this game. Guys, the rest of you guys can't win this game. I'll win this game single-handedly. Here we go. Wow. Done. and that is, that's why we're paying him that contract is for that Karlsson, and we haven't had him. So I'm excited. Do you have any other notes about this game?
No, that was pretty much it. Sharks were lucky, to win that one in the shootout, and it was a great Karlsson game, and it was because the one thing I did want to add to this is it's hard to say kind of where Karlsson's past happiness comes from, whether that's his natural style or that's what he was been coached to do here. Is don't put the puck on net, just try to pass it onto somebody's stick, Brent Burns style, and fine, but maybe just try to get the puck to the goalie and see what happens when you've got your own guys piled up there. Give them an opportunity to get that rebound and push it in. And hey, if the puck goes in accidentally, then great. So.
Hey, I mean that's what we see from Burns, right? Burns will rifle the puck at anything that is in front of the net.
Yeah.
And the hope is, for a long time it was paths. That someone will tip it in or get a rebound. It's not even necessarily about trying to get it directly in the net from that shot as much as it's create chaos and confusion in front, and that will lead to goals. Not every goal's pretty. A lot of them got to be sloppy. And in fact, that's why people play, in that sort of crease perimeter specifically to get those sort of dirty little goals. So keep going. Sharks would keep going. They would play Minnesota again. And they would win this game as well, but score of 4-2. They would get goals in the second period from Rudolph Spalsers and Ryan Donato, who I also have been enjoying thoroughly. Who else scored in this game? Knizov scored and Kane scored. There's also a trend that starts popping up here, and I'm going to call it the slow creep back up to 900 from our good friend Martin Jones. And something that I find a little bit fascinating, if not unfair. This team's evolved a lot over the years. Obviously, it's not the same staff, but one of the things that always rubbed me the wrong way was way back when in the year we got Niemi, because what we did was we got Niinimäki first, and it was made clear at the time, if you go back and you read articles, that he was our guy. And then we shook Chicago's tree for Hjalmarsson, and Niemi fell out instead. And then we got Niemi, and all of a sudden it went from Niinimäki is our guy to let's run a tandem. And then when the season started, it was psych. Sorry, Niinimäki, it's Niemi's time. And I don't know. That always frustrated me. So coming into this season, I knew the situation obviously between Jones and Dubnyk, right? Two guys struggling, not having great years the year prior, both trying to get back to their form. The Sharks basically brought Dubnyk in as sort of a low risk reclamation project for 1 year. Not that big of a deal if it didn't work out. And there was a game a while back, I can't remember which game, unfortunately, but it was one where Dubnyk was playing hot, and Boogs was asked whether or not he would let him play the back-to-back, and the answer was no, because they need to see both goalies, and we don't want to play guys back-to-backs and blah blah blah. And then this week, kind of the opposite thing happens completely, where don't get me wrong, Jones right now is the hot hand, and I'm for playing the hot hands, but I don't know. Don't lie to me. I guess is what I'm saying. Just be on. Hey. There's something going on here. Well, I mean, they're not going to say that because that would be terrible.
Yeah, they're not going to say that Jones will always be given the opportunity to be the number one no matter what.
Yeah.
Because you can't get a guy like Dubnyk to come here with that statement. I mean, I'm sure Dubnyk came here because he was given the told, look, you see what we have. See that trash fire in our crease? You see that. This is your chance to seize this opportunity and rebuild your game and potentially be our number one.
We are potentially we are potentially a good goaltender away from being a Stanley Cup team. Look at the lineup. Look at all these guys you got here.
Look, we fooled Carlson into that too. Look.
Fool me once, shame on you. So yeah, this is another game that the Sharks ended up winning against Minnesota. This would be the second game that they would win in a row. Do you have any thoughts on this game?
I just was happy to see Knyzhov finally get his first goal. And I really liked how in the post game, Tomas Hertl made him wear that amazing wig. At first, when I was looking at the stills of that video, I was like, "Whoa, Knyzhov's hair is amazing!" But then I was like, "Oh no, that's a wig."
Oh, by the way, I love, we didn't coin it obviously, but my favorite line name used to be Jumbo Heated Patty way back in the day of, Danny Heatley and Marlowe and Jumbo being on the line together. I have loved the coining of My Balls Hurt for the Myers, Balsers, and Hertl tandem. I think it's phenomenal. All right, Sharks will go on to play the Kings. And I gotta be honest with you. I think they really pumped up the crowd sounds for this rivalry game, which is jarring when you see that there's literally not a fan in the stand. When it's subtle, I don't mind it as much. Hey, big deal here that I want to get to, which is not related to the play, but in these last couple of games while we were gone, we saw Brody Brazil bow out for his A's duty. And I just wanted to say that I love Brody Brazil. I know when Brody Brazil first came to this franchise, I thought, guy's too much cheese. Who is this? What is this? But I'll tell you what, over the years, his dedication to spreading the sport of hockey in the Bay Area, which is even his mission statement on his Twitter, if you go check it out, has been just absolutely amazing and commendable. He has served, at least in my life, as a very good entry point for a lot of casual fans, kids, girlfriends who aren't into hockey, wives who maybe aren't as well. He's just kind of brought a really good, warm, cheesy family environment. And when he got paired up with Curtis Brown, my reaction was, "What are we doing with the broadcast?" But I'll tell you what, it became fun. And look, Brody's good at what he does. He's a good host. So I'm really bummed that he's not going to be with us the rest of the season. I'm hoping that it is just the rest of the season and not more of a long-term thing. And I mean, no offense to Lord Britt or anyone else coming in, but the Sharks broadcasters, one of the things that they tend to do really well is just become part of your family. Same with Jamie Baker. When Jamie Baker started, a player I liked, but as a broadcaster, I thought he was mystifying at first when he was paired up with Dan Rusanowski on the radio, and I think Dan was mystified by it too. But over time, he became part of the family. When he left, it was sad. And so, not having Brody there in the pregame is a bit of a bummer for me. So that's my rant. The Sharks playing the Kings here. They win. Woo! goals from the My Balls Hurt line, right? So Hertl in the first, Meyer in the second, and Balsers in the third. And I should point out that we got a wonderful gift from Martin Jones. A shutout, folks. Remember those things? Shutouts. Sharks looked okay here. Again, I feel like I'm seeing them play better, but I am also not convinced that they're not just.
Well, here's what I would say.
I go back and forth on this.
The Wild game just prior to this, and then the shutout against the Kings, I thought were probably the Sharks' two most competent performances this season, particularly back to back. I mean, I actually think that Wild game, the Sharks looked. I mean, I said on Twitter essentially, why can my team not figure out whether they are tanking or good?
Yeah.
To pick one, fucking choose one, right? Like,
yeah. What a tease, right? What a tease.
And that's the thing, right? This team clearly has not chosen one. I mean, I think they've chosen, let's see if we can make the playoffs, for whatever reason.
Sure.
But of course, you also have to be good to make the playoffs. And it's only really recently that I felt like, I don't know, maybe Bogner finally got everybody to buy into what he wanted them to do.
It's possible. Takes time.
Burns has played a fairly, this is something I've said a few times this year, but Burns has made fewer mental errors this season than I think he has in years. Fewer obvious, like, oh dang, I tried too hard here and now off to the races. Right. They are, as you note, also benefiting from Martin Jones probably playing, minus that goal that trickled through his pads last night, probably his three best games he's played in a long time.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just voodoo or things have come together. We really need to obviously see them play well down the stretch because they've gotten. I just saw on Twitter, friend of the podcast and great community person. Foul Ball 15 posted that essentially the Sharks have gotten 45% of their points from the Kings and the Ducks. So that's only going to get them so far. If they really are going to make the playoffs, they have to play like they played against the Wild and the first Kings game consistently the rest of the way. And if they do, we'll see things change in terms of their goal differential, etc. I mean, they'll look like they fit. They haven't looked like they fit up to this point. That's the problem. So,
yeah, it's, I think I chimed in on our Discord saying, damn it, they're going to make people think they're making a run of this.
Yeah.
And sure enough, that's sort of what they're starting to do. So yeah, Sharks ended up winning this game 3-0. And then last night, the second game of this back-to-back, the Sharks would win again by a score of 3-2, goals from Kevin Labanc, Evander Kane, which was kind of a funny one, and Dylan Gambrell. So
courtesy of John Leonard, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
I will not stand for this John Leonard erasure I see on Gambrell's goal.
That was a brilliant heads up play by Leonard, an excellent pass,
and hard work and speed that led to the opportunity too, right? Like
he put Gambrell in a situation where if Gambrell missed it, he would have had a lot of egg on his face. It would have been a stern talking to in the locker room. There is no situation where you should miss that goal unless you fumble the puck, and if you do, oh boy, you just get yourself right into the locker room. Just don't even go back just go to the bench, keep walking at that point in time.
Yep.
Well, Ben, listen, that bumps the Sharks up here, right? So 3 stars of the week. Who are you looking at?
Oh man. Wow. Well, I think I don't know quite where to put Karlsson because I think he belongs up there pretty high.
Sure.
I also am, to me, it's between Meyer, Hurdle, Balsers, and Karlsson is kind of like the consistent guys this week. I mean, Meyer had one of his best games of the season in the first Kings game. I mean, so much so that obviously he was called out for it by the coaching staff that has been trying to find ways to get him to play more consistently. And whatever. Like I don't buy the whole public motivation thing anyway. But I don't know really where to put them because it felt like the Sharks were getting contributions kind of from different guys each night. Which is good,
tricky.
Right? Because that's what you want to see from a good team is not a single line have to kind of carry the weight. So I think if you put a gun to my head, I think I would say Balcer's third star, because he's just been playing really well, and I worry that the Sharks are going to, as we talked about what the Sharks will do at the trade deadline, I worry they, rather than moving guys like Sorensen and Marleau, they will try to capitalize on moving a younger guy like Balcers, which I think would be the dumbest thing they could do, because I think Balcers has a role to play on this team in the next 2 to 3 years as a top 9 player. So let's say Balcers third. I'm going to put Meyer second because I love Timo Meyer, and I even think when he's not scoring, he contributes quite a bit to this team. And then I'll put Carlson first just to infuriate people.
Oh, Ben, that should be your goal in life. To just
it is my goal in life. Have you ever seen my Twitter feed?
Yeah, it's true. I'm going to give my 3 stars to. I mean, I agree with you. I think things were spread out a lot this week. I'm going to give my 3 stars. I'm going to give my third star to Brodie Brazil just for a job, well done in a crap season, at least helping make things entertaining for me. And like I said, I'll miss his chemistry with Curtis Brown and the jokes that they crack. My number 2, I'm going to give to Carlson because I liked seeing old Carlson for a second. I also like seeing snarky, shut up with that stupid question, Carlson. I think that was great. And also that laser beam goal was great.
Yeah.
And that slap shot goal was great. Both those goals were great. First star, I'm not sure. I'm gonna give it to. I'm gonna give it to the Meyer Hurdle Balcers line.
Oh, what a cop out!
I know it's a cop out, but you know what? The line's got a great name, Ben, and
We'll give it to the name then.
Don't fight. Oh yeah, to the person who named that. I have to go back and look on Twitter on who it was, but congratulations, you are awesome. I wish I were you.
Wow.
That puts the Sharks 1 point out of playoff contention right now with 38 points. They are in 6th. Technically, they're tied for 5th with the St. Louis Blues. And then 4 points behind them are the Los Angeles Kings.
Thank God for bad divisions.
Yes, again, Arizona is that team sitting there at 39 points. So the Sharks, they can make it. We'll see whether or not they make the right set of decisions once they get there. The Sharks also, in the next next week, they've got a game against the Anaheim Mighty Ducks.
That's good.
That's on Tuesday. That's good. Yes. And then they play the Kings again. They seem to have the Kings card right now.
That's also good.
Yes. In back-to-back games, Friday and Saturday. All 3 of those games are at home. So Sharks looking to do as much damage as they can before time runs out. We also have the trade deadline coming up. I think in about is the 13th this year, right? So everything's a little wonky this year. But,
I'm actually not sure what day the trade deadline is.
I think it's the 13th, but I could also have some other actual job deadline on the 13th. I should probably check to figure out.
I think it is typically Monday into Tuesday. Of a week, so that would make sense.
So normally I would be really excited about the trade deadline and say it's a lot of fun. This one I'm so confused. I've been so confused about how any roster stuff has worked this year. And the cap staying flat is also going to make things pretty complicated for teams like the Sharks. But potentially a lot to pay attention to this week. I hope all of you find the time to tune in, watch, check it out. Speaking of things you can tune into, you can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts. You can subscribe to it on iTunes. Or iTunes is more or less the same thing. Spotify, Android people, whatever. But hey, rate us, give us 5 stars, review, let us know what you think. Helps the algorithm and helps us know whether or not we are just dicks, because sometimes we might be. You can also check this out on the web if you want to stream our podcast from the website discreetly at circlingthecup.com. You can check us, Ben, out at Twitter at circlingthecup. And of course, we are on Facebook, and I know we don't really update it regularly. It's really more of a touch point for us. So that's facebook.com/circlingthepuck. If you write us, though, I do want you to know we do check in weekly just to see if anyone has questions or anything like that, and we're always happy to chat or address them. So shoot them our way. I think that's everything, right, Ben? I didn't miss
you're good.
A promo anywhere? Okay, cool. Well, we don't have advertisers, so I don't have to worry about that stuff. So this concludes another week. Sorry Colin couldn't join. Sorry we didn't let him have his ref rant. I know you were all looking forward to that. Maybe in the off season or a slow week, we'll let him just go off unchained.
It's always the same ref rant, so...
Yeah.
They're bad and they should feel bad, but again, it's a league run by meatheads for meatheads, so here we are.
Always ending on a high note, Ben.
Best sport though.
Yeah, best sport, dumbest league. Say bye-bye.
Bye everybody.
Bye-bye. Cool, that was a fun one.
Yep.
You did record it right.
Oh yeah, it's recorded. I mean, even if I didn't record it, I could get the stream out if I needed to. So.
That's right.
It's fine. But yeah, I know I recorded it.
That's what you're going to be saying when you're in your 50s. Oh!
You.
Right? It gets harder to pee. I'm not even sure what happens.
Well, happy Easter, bud.
You too, bud. Yeah. You'll be happy to know that in our new house we have 2 rabbits, 2 wild rabbits, which means we can't have a garden. And the boys have named them Peter Rabbit and Cottontail.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is really good because right now my other son's stuffed poodle is named Bob Chicken, and his flamingo is named Nudie. So getting Peter Rabbit and Cottontail created by those boys
is a miracle.
It is a miracle. And it was also really funny because they've seen Peter Rabbit, but they forgot they've seen Peter Rabbit. And so my father-in-law was like, you guys come up with that after the movie? And Landon was like, no, I just came up with the name Peter Rabbit. And I'm like, don't tell people that.
Yeah, I just created it. Okay, Donald Trump.
Yeah, I also created Winnie the Pooh. What a coincidence.
When there's a wild bear outside your house, they can name it Winnie the Pooh and claim that they just came up with that name. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah.
What were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say I have a friend who lives in outside Boise, Idaho, who they had a wild rabbit in their yard, and basically they just were like, yeah, we're growing all sorts of little herbs here, and it turns out they're just feeding the rabbit. So...
Oh yeah, yeah. The woman who lives across the street is so insanely accomplished, and she's actually a master gardener, which is like an official title that you can get. And she's got a charity where she has people growing food in their garden that they give to, like folks in need. And we were like, that's rad. We're so in on it. And she goes, oh, you can't do it. And we're like, what do you mean? And she goes, oh, you guys have the rabbits. She's like, just don't even bother. She's like, you have 2 choices. You get rid of those rabbits, which I wouldn't do, or you get rid of a garden. I was like, oh.
Yeah, don't get rid of the rabbits. Let them live, and your kids can enjoy them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Until they get rabies. Yeah, sounds good.
Right. All right, man.
I'll talk to you later.